Welcome to Unapologetically Yours, a podcast where we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationships and connection to business and belief systems. Because in a world where we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically. Hi, welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of the Unapologetically Yours podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I am so happy to be with you today. This podcast is a lot of years in the making, and to be kicking this off with you means so much to me. So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to give you a sense of who I am and what I'm about and a little bit of background on my story so you can carry that with you in the episodes to come. I am a multifaceted entrepreneur. I started my agency, Yakety, more than 10 years ago. And since then have built a multi-seven-figure agency that helps purpose-driven brands and businesses to make an impact in the world through storytelling mechanisms from branding to video production, podcast production, and website development and beyond. And I'm also a mother. I have 3 young kids, ages 3, 6, and almost 8. And these kids are my life, and balancing entrepreneurship with motherhood and being a whole ass person has been a journey. So let's start at the beginning. So I was born and raised in the suburbs of Chicago, one of 3 daughters, quintessential middle child right here. Always a creative person, artist, dreamer, sort of a wild child in terms of being very adventurous and always scaling the tops of all of the trees in the neighborhood. Very, very free-spirited. I knew since a young age that I wanted to be a writer and a creator. But more than anything, I knew that my job on this planet was to make a difference. My parents divorced when I was in 5th grade. It was a long process. And so faced some of those challenges growing up in terms of balancing the schedules, balancing the back and forth, and balancing the different personalities. Came out relatively unscathed. I graduated high school right around the time of Y2K and was so absolutely certain that the world was going to end that it did not matter where I went to college. And I knew I was going to be an English major. I landed at the beautiful University of Tennessee, where I was the only person from my high school to go there in any recent years. So it was really cool to be able to carve my own path at a major university in a new region. Had the time of my life. And it was during that time where I really explored my artistry. I was the editor of the Daily Beacon newspaper. Well, I was the entertainment editor. I had a column that I even got some fan mail and some hate mail. And I feel like that's a sign that like you've really made it when you're, 21, 22 years old. And then after that, I felt like the world was mine. Everything that people had said was true. You can go out into the world and be anything. And I had all the tools and all the resources to do so. And I was obsessed with Sex and the City. And I was like, I am going to be the next Carrie Bradshaw, period, the end. And it was crickets. There were absolutely no one gave one shit that I had been the arts and entertainment editor at the University of Tennessee Daily Beacon. And I had no money and ended up moving back to Chicago to live at home while figuring out what my career path was going to be. I was such a dark and depressing time. Just that realization that actually you don't have freedom. You do have to pay to live in this world, and lots of really wonderful life lessons. I did get a job as a sales and marketing manager for a Chicago-based candy company. Oh my God. First of all, the owner of that company has since passed away. His name is Mark Putsch, and he changed my life in so many ways. Like, he exposed me to sales. And at that time, my connotation of sales was that it was, like selling vacuum cleaners, and they had a really negative connotation that felt inauthentic. And what I learned through that experience is actually sales is just about connection. And so I had a manager who drove me absolutely bonkers. and who would have me act out sales calls. And if I didn't like pick up a phone with my hand and actually pretend that I was holding a phone, I would get in trouble. But that time in my life, I was 22. I had half of the country and was going around to major retailers slanging custom candy. And there was two things that stood out. One, it was great to be able to travel for work and connect with different people in different regions. And then I was also one of the only women in the candy business. And it was a total good old boys club. And who would have thought that? So like, not only am I the youngest by 15 years, I'm also one of very few females. And so the experiences that I had there, standing in circles of other candy executives and being asked really inappropriate questions about my body and put through the ringer in many, many ways. And we'll get into some of these in future episodes because it's worth diving into. I learned that I couldn't let my guard down and that I had to be ready for anything at any time professionally. And I think that was when really the armor started to be put on. And during that time, there wasn't a Me Too movement to fall back on to articulate some of the things and challenges that had happened. What I learned, though, was so important, that sales was actually a really incredible career path. And I was freelancing and building a career writing, doing some copywriting for other brands, but it wasn't enough for me to totally hang my hat on or go full time with, though I tried desperately. And one of the things that, of course, like as a super, super creative person, I realized that I could stand out in the business world by bringing problem solving to the table and coming up with cool designs and creative solutions, and didn't necessarily fit that mold. So I brought that authentically to any role that I was in. But I wanted to make more money and realized that if I was going to dig myself out of this and get on the career path that I wanted to, I was going to have to play in a higher stakes game. I set my sights on a higher volume sales position because I knew that I needed to spend more time in the business world before I pursued a more creative career path. So I have always been really interested in real estate and got my real estate license and got a job as a tenant rep office broker at a major global company that had just set up a new office in Chicago. I think this was 2007. So a really great time to enter the world of commercial real estate if you're familiar with what happened in 2008. But I was almost 25 at that time, working 100% commission. And this time I doubled down on being the only woman in all of the central business district in Chicago. There was probably fewer than 10 tenant rep office brokers who were female, and I was one of them. And super male dominated, 100% commission for everyone on the tenant rep side. So very, very cutthroat in terms of competing for commissions, in terms of what success looked like. And for a lot of the brokerages, tenant rep being successful in this, and what tenant rep means is that we would represent the businesses in their lease negotiations, or their office purchase agreements. And so I was working with the C-level individuals and decision makers to help them figure out where they were going to office. There was a lot of things that came from this time in my life. One, every single business was innovative and using all of these very common, use a streamlined approach, all of these very, very common business vernacular to describe who they were in the world. And I noted that was a problem and something that helping businesses to figure out how to talk about themselves was something I had a high interest in. And then also the comfort working with C-level decision makers. It was never something I had a problem with, could talk to anyone. And again, I was able to differentiate myself in a career by going against the grain. I wasn't the person who was sitting behind a desk making 100 cold calls like they told me to. I was out in the community. I was meeting new people. I was networking. I was forging relationships. I was making introductions and building a network in a way that felt right to me as the controller of my own destiny. And I got a lot of flack for that at the time, and also won some awards and had a really successful career. But I hated the dismal, dark cloud over like how cutthroat it was. I remember even my mentor in the business scammed me out of a commission or got involved in a deal that I was working on and had been working on for like 3 years. And I had to give half my commission to him. So it was one of those things that just didn't feel good to be part of. So what I did, I started working with nonprofit organizations. And so at this time, we're looking at like 2010, 2011 to help them use social media as a way to build an audience for their nonprofit organization. So one of the organizations I worked with was called the Silver Lining Foundation, and they were so amazing. And they provided free mammograms for those who were uninsured and underinsured. And so we founded an auxiliary board. I think there was like 5 or 6 of us hosting events and helping to lean on 360 marketing to build an email list, build a social media following, and spread the word about the events and fundraisers that we were doing. And this gave me so much life when I had this like dark cloud of other happening professionally. And don't get me wrong, that time in my life was it was fun. It was exciting, but same thing. Like, yes, I was performing authentically in my role and showing up as my creative self and doing things that the way that I knew intuitively was going to bring me the most success, but I couldn't let my guard down. I want to also mention that, like, yes, I understand there's a professional standard when it comes to the workforce. And there's also a level of safety that everyone's entitled to be their full self, to wear what you want to wear and not have to worry about repercussions or even just basic stereotypes. But I learned a lot about what it meant to be a business owner because I would get a commission check, I would stock my freezer, and then I would hold on tight because I wasn't always sure when the next commission was coming in. And in the meantime, I was building a huge, vast network in this space that I knew I didn't have a long-term future in, but used it as a really great stepping stone and foundation to take everything I could from the experience so that I could build my next chapter. And through that also meant this work that I was doing with nonprofit organizations to help them write for a target audience, build an audience. And that brought me to 2012 when I left commercial real estate, and I had saved up enough money at that point to pursue a master's degree in journalism from Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism. To be 30 years old and just totally start over my whole life was like so empowering and so scary and so fucking fun. I went back to grad school and I was hanging out with 22 and 23-year-olds. I learned so much about this new generation of workers and what their experiences were and what they cared about. And they were my peers and my friends. And it was awesome. And it was a 1-year program. And I focused there on everything. I was like, I'll go ahead and hand 3 concentrations. I'll do long form creative writing. I did focus on video. And then I also did business writing. I did as much as I possibly could in the time and simultaneously started Yakety. And it was such a special day because when I started the organization, I remember my sister had just had her first baby, my niece, Lily. And I was like, okay, so I know I'm going to grad school. It's July and it doesn't start till September. So what am I doing here? At first I went into HR and I was like, hey, I'm going to quit. Can you please make sure that I don't get fucked out of these pending commissions that should be coming in? And she's like, yep, I got you. Then I went and I resigned to my boss. And he actually passed away last year. And he was such a big supporter of me. Shout out to Kevin Duckler. And he was like, you'll be awesome at that. And I'm going to miss you. It was just such a great affirmation that I was on the right path. And so took the rest of the summer off. And I remember sitting with my sister while she's holding her newborn. And she's like, so what are you going to call this new company that you're starting? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And she's like, well, your middle name is K. And then K backwards is Yak. And we both at the same time were like, Yakety. That was the beginning. After I finished the program, I was doing 3 things at once. I was building Yakety. I was working as an intern at a content marketing agency in Chicago, and I was freelance writing for the Sun-Times. And I have to tell you that I was a director of a global company before I made this career change. And to then go and be an intern at a small agency, it could have been a humbling experience. I could have been too big for my britches about it. But instead I was like, I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can with this experience while I'm building something else. And I did. And it was great. There was so many people that I met from that time of life who have circled back professionally over the years. And I think it's just an important lesson to don't complain about the experiences and appreciate the fact that there are so many opportunities in life to gain experiences, and each one of those matters, and each one is a stepping stone to get you where you are and on your path and towards your destiny. So by 2014, I was able to shed the layers. I was able to stop working at the agency. I was able to stop freelancing for the Times, and then I hired my first employee, and the rest is sort of history. Have been totally client first in terms of how we've grown, just organically starting new service lines to be able to serve our clients. And that for me is a direct result of not just being a salesperson, but a salesperson who listens to the needs of our clients and then customizes packages that will best serve their needs, not just big organizations, but small, so that we can help and serve the greater good at a variety of different price points. The path of Yakety Yak at first was to be everything to everyone and to take on as much work as possible. And then we realized that actually, we really don't want to work with assholes at all. We don't want to be a pawn for a system that is not inclusive, a system that doesn't support women in business, and made a lot of hard decisions for the greater good. It's not easy when you're supporting a team to turn down business that doesn't align with your moral compass. But I did that a lot, and not just turn down business, but actually would fire clients that weren't aligned. But still, at the end of the day, I started Yakety Yak for freedom. I started this agency because I knew that I wanted to be a mom. I knew that in every fiber of my being since I was a little girl. So I thought that building this company was going to be more than just my freedom, but a way for me to lean in and lean out of my professional life into my personal life. But the reality is that when building a business, there's a playbook, and that playbook was written mostly by nothing against men, but it was written by men with patriarchal expectations and deep capitalistic expectations. And even the influences in my life, primarily others who had paved the way before me, were not necessarily women business owners, they were men. And so the decisions that they had made were coming from a different lens and a different perspective than mine. So I had my daughter in 2016, and I remember being in labor, emailing people while I was on the way to the hospital. My water broke. It was like the full dramatic water breaking, and in active labor on the way to the hospital, emailing people about the work that I was hired to do for them. And I didn't think that was fucked up. I thought that was normal. I thought that was my duty as a person on this planet who is helping to support the greater good with my business that mattered a whole lot to me. And I took about, 48 hours of maternity leave, if that. Around that time, we opened an office in downtown Chicago and I was living in the western suburbs of Chicago at that time. And I opened this office with because that's what you do. If you have a business, you open an office in downtown. And but I did want to attract the best talent. And at this point, I had a team of, I think, 6 or 7 people. And I remember pumping on a dirty bathroom floor because I couldn't find a private space in the co-working office that we had rented. And I finally got them to like put up a sign to block off the space for me. And and they did, but like the dudes, no offense to the dudes, but kept using it as the poo bathroom. So I would like be sitting there with like my boobs ready to explode so I could bring home milk for my baby. And I'm waiting while a guy is dropping a deuce in the poo bathroom that had been designated my pumping area. And then go in and sit in that festering wilderness and realize sort of at that point, like, wow, the world is not made for whole people who are trying to be the best moms that they can be and the best career people that they can be. And I know that there's multiple examples that can apply to dads as well, from not having changing tables in male bathrooms and other things like that. But my experience obviously has been from the mother's standpoint. Anyway, onward, kept going, had another baby in 2018. And yes, life was complicated, and I would get the kids to bed and I would stay up till midnight. I was going at a pace that was, I didn't know at the time, like so deeply unsustainable for my whole person self. And in the meantime, the things that fell away for me were creativity, time with friends, taking care of my body. And they are such luxuries to anyone who has little kids, let alone someone who's running a business. But it's not just those who are running a business, it's those who are trying to provide financially for their families too. In 2020, I had my third child, a son, and he was born in May 2020. And at that time, I'm leading a team of 20 people through COVID with a newborn baby that I had to deliver in very unusual circumstances in the middle of a global pandemic. Thus ensued like two of the hardest years of my life. And I know I'm not alone there. Anyone who is navigating parenthood and careers during the pandemic, and especially in Chicago, where we had so much racial strife and it was just a lonely time to be a human. And then I'm leading a team of people who are struggling with their identities in a post-pandemic world and struggling with where they fit in from a societal expectation standpoint of race and an identity. And then you throw in the Me Too movement and how all of these experiences that women and people have been having over the course of their lifetime suddenly have a name, and we've got validation. So much emotion was bubbling to the surface. Let's see. So here we are, 2021 now. I have a team of almost 30 people. I have acquired a video production firm. I have very aligned clients. I have 3 beautiful kids. And I was fried. Absolutely fried. I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't know who I was. I had burnt out in every sense of the word. I had left it all on the table professionally. I had followed every one of the capitalistic rules about how to build a business and how to scale and all of those things. And I read all the books and I did all of it. And it was doing the same things with motherhood. I breastfed for a year. I did all the pumping. I took care of my kids. I had a perfect nanny. I was involved in all of the activities. I was showing up. And the one person I wasn't showing up for was myself. And I'm not so bad. I deserve to be a presence in my own life. So this started a journey back to center. So what happened next, I can best describe as I call it my Jumanji drum. This little voice inside of me was saying, hey, remember me? Hey, remember you wanted to make a difference? Hey, remember you're an artist? Remember you love to climb trees and they're this wild person and really funny and like to laugh? And the drumming got louder. And every time I would ignore that little voice, something else in my life would crumble. I would lose a pillar that I had built on a belief system that wasn't mine. And then I realized that I had to unpack everything. Started by examining like, okay, what's mine and what was taught to me? What do I believe about this? And what is a concession that I'm making for someone else? Because I wanted to return to my own barometer of knowing, like, yes, it's okay to make compromises to accommodate relationships in your life. Yes, it's okay to flex. But to do so without being consciously aware of it is the part where I had gotten a little bit lost. I think the big catalyst for me was, well, one, I had been just getting back into my spirituality. I was raised Lutheran. Religion was always really important to me, but I had a few different takes on it, I think, than what some might think when it comes to organized religion, and always believe that love is what needs to come first. Love is the answer. And always noticed that anytime we were in church, that the light would shine a little bit brighter down through the skylights, and music was such a big part of connecting to the greater good, and believe very deeply in loving one another. But what I had turned off in myself was that buzz, that inner buzz of when you get into like a creative flow. And that's when I believe the universe and God is working through us. And I'd really silenced myself to that. I was creating no space for my own creativity. And so I started writing again and painting again, and which were parts of, I started writing. I won a young authors contest in 1989 with a piece called When Crystal Met the Ogre. And it actually is so funny looking back at this story of a little girl who goes up against this big, scary man who wants to control her. And that was what I was writing about when I was fucking like 6 years old, and now 7 years old. And then now that's what I had sort of come up against unknowingly in my life to that point in time. So I went on a retreat. That was one thing that I did to connect back to myself, that had a Temazcal ceremony, and where we sat in the hot tent and connected back with the elements, and did creative writing and breath work and sound healing. And I felt like I was coming home to myself. I cried for 3 days straight. I adopted so many practices that helped me to continue to unpack whatever limiting beliefs that I had adopted over the course of time. Helped me to realign my life with the direction that I want to go, that I know I'm meant to go as a person who's here to make a difference. And part of that meant making big changes. And one of those was how my agency was operating. Previously, I had followed all of the guidelines and was perched at the top, a very Piscean way of leading. And that's not what I want, and that's not who I am. And so have basically burned it down while we're still running, like as a living phoenix coming from the ashes, where we're focused on circular leadership and leaning on the expertise of everyone on our team to lead and shine and contribute so that we can put our best foot forward without anyone just burning out, or without people not having people not using their voices. And same thing happened in my personal life. So thinking about my family, how am I showing up for my kids? I can't show up for my kids as my full self if I'm tired or distracted. And so really starting to compartmentalize that work can wait. Work can wait. I have 6 cute little eyes looking up at me, and that these kids are growing up so fast, and that me leading by example and showing up as my full authentic self gives them permission to be their full authentic self, and not reteach those limiting beliefs, and not reinforce the generational trauma of what's come before us, of doing exactly what we're told, and teaching lessons that we don't even know why we're teaching them, and standing in my power. As I went down this path, I realized that this is something I need to immediately bring to the people in my life. And I've been a musician since I was a little girl. I was a singer. I played the trombone when I was in 5th grade. I was a very tiny girl playing the trombone, played guitar, piano, and music was a huge part of my life. And when I first heard the singing bowls, I felt like I was coming home to music again and had found this way where I can use music to connect back to myself. So from bringing music back to creative writing, to then connecting with my body through breath and meditation and connecting through nature, I was able to start to figure out, like, again, what was mine and what was someone else's. And because the body knows, and we've just been so taught to not listen to ourselves. So really connecting back to like, okay, if my body is nervous, I should listen to that. Or if my body shows resistance, I should listen to that. And starting to lean on new tools to figure out my path forward. So with that, I'm Ashley. I am still founder and CEO of Yakety. I am also a breathwork facilitator. I am a sound healer. I am a poet. I am an artist. I am a facilitator of retreats, workshops, events, all designed to help people connect back with their passion, power, and purpose. And the whole point of this podcast is to help give you a different perspective, to help you ask yourself some of the challenging questions, or questions that you've been dying to know about. Are you on the right path? Are you living a life for you? Are you living unapologetically? Thanks for tuning in. I'm so glad you're here, and I can't wait for all that's in store for us together this season. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go out, make some mischief in the world. And until then, I'm Ashley, and I'm unapologetically yours.